The last thing I remember was the feel of hands on my back and the sickening drop as I went over the concrete barrier on the roof. Just before the fear kicked in, I had one very clear thought. I cannot believe I fell for the biggest cliché in fiction. When my eyes opened again, all I saw was white. Not blinding. Not heavenly. Just white. And that's when it hit me. Damn it. I'm dead. For a moment, confusion tangled with the memories of my past life, everything from the moment I discovered I was the real heiress of the Claymore family. Having watched way too many Rebirth stories, I half expected to wake up in a familiar scene, Clara, the fake daughter, pretending to faint, my brother Trevor scowling and threatening me, and my parents, Elaine and Mark, ignoring me in favor of her. But this white nothingness. This was different. That's because you have not yet been reborn. The deep voice cut straight through my thoughts, making me jump. I spun around, but there wasn't a single hint of another person. Ah? God? I asked, because apparently death had not improved my social skills. A low chuckle answered me. Not hardly. The white dissolved all at once, peeling away like smoke. Suddenly I was standing in a generic office, drab walls, uncomfortable chairs, and filing cabinets. Actual filing cabinets. Who knew people still used those? The office door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He wore a suit that looked like it came straight from a 1980s high school drama club costume rack, boxy shoulders, questionable fabric, the whole tragic ensemble. He was ageless in that impossible, uncanny way, but his hair, well. The top was thinning, but the back flowed to his shoulders like he'd made peace with the universe decades ago, and decided to keep the mullet anyway. He closed the door behind him like this was all perfectly normal, then walked to the desk and opened a file with my name on it. Well, Sidney Claymore. Croft, I corrected firmly. The bitterness from before slipped into my voice before I could stop it. The man paused, looked at me with mild curiosity, then hummed thoughtfully. HM. He didn't argue. He just went back to the file, which somehow made it worse. So, am I having some weird coma dream or hallucination? I asked, glancing around the drab office. The ageless man snorted. I'd hope that if you were dreaming this, your taste in decor would be better. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, having absolutely no idea how to respond to that. He flipped another page. No coma. No hallucination. No dream sequence. You died. Rather messily, I might add. I winced. Yeah, well, gravity and I had a disagreement. Gravity won, he said, not unkindly. It usually does. He closed the file with a soft thump. Before you're reborn, we need to clear up a few misunderstandings. There weren't any misunderstandings, I snapped before I could stop myself. For some reason that rich family dragged me back into their lives only to ignore me, and then literally push me to my death. The man raised an eyebrow, not mocking, not disbelieving, just evaluating. Is that what you think happened? He asked quietly. That's what did happen, I insisted. They treated Clara like royalty, and treated me like a stray dog they couldn't get rid of. He tapped the file with one finger. Interesting. Because that's not what your life record shows. I froze. My what? Your life record, he repeated, as if this were the most normal phrase in the world. Every choice, every moment, every assumption. Including the ones you got wrong. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached under the desk and dragged out something that made my eyebrows shoot up. An old-school film projector. The kind with metal reels and a faint smell of dust and disappointment. He set it on the desk with a grunt. I stared at it. Seriously? Limbo's never heard of laptops. Laptops crash, he said, threading the film with practiced ease. This doesn't. The lights in the office dimmed automatically, or maybe the room just decided to cooperate, and a pull-down movie screen materialized on the wall with a soft F-whip. Now, he said, stepping aside as the projector flickered to life, let's start with the day you met your real parents. My stomach twisted. The projector resumed, and the screen brightened. There I was, younger, thinner, exhausted, standing in the Claymore foyer for the first time. Elaine and Mark were smiling, practically glowing with excitement. My mother reached for my hand like she'd been waiting her whole life to touch it. My eyes went straight to Trevor. He stood behind them, arms crossed, scowling at me like I'd personally offended him by existing. And then Clara stepped forward, gave me a shaky smile, opened her mouth to speak, and promptly collapsed. Elaine gasped. Mark rushed to her side. Trevor shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. We need to take her to the hospital, Elaine said, panicked. The clip froze. I crossed my arms, scowling. That's when I knew exactly what my life was going to be like. Who the hell goes to the hospital for a fainting spell, anyway? The man made a quiet TSK sound. And that, he said, is where your first misunderstanding begins. He clicked something on the projector, and the scene shifted. Now we were in a hospital exam room, one I'd never seen. Elaine and Mark stood beside Clara's bed. A doctor flipped through her chart. There's nothing wrong with her, he said. No medical reason for the fainting. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Did you fake it? Trevor immediately jumped in. Mom, she was scared. Trevor, Elaine said sharply, be quiet. She turned back to Clara. Did you fake the fainting spell? Clara's chin trembled. Tears welled up. I just saw how happy you were to meet Sidney. I got scared you'd abandon me. Trevor sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I rolled my eyes at the screen. But then Mark's voice cut through the room, angry, firm, nothing like the man I remembered. Who are you acting for? He demanded. Did we say anything about abandoning you? Did we say anything at all? Clara sobbed harder. We will not tolerate this kind of childish behavior, Mark continued. You are an adult, Clara. Act like one. Sidney is our daughter, and we will spend time with her and get to know her. His voice softened and he placed a hand on her shaking shoulders. You should do the same. Don't jump to conclusions, Clara. We can love all of our children. Trevor started protesting again, but I wasn't listening anymore. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. I had been so sure. So absolutely certain. And now, I wasn't sure of anything at all. The projector clicked again, and the scene shifted. Now I was watching myself a year later, standing in the Claymore kitchen, clutching an envelope like it was a lifeline. I got it, younger me said, breathless. The university selected me for the honors award ceremony. They want me to speak. Elaine gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Mark beamed. Sidney, that's incredible, he said. We are so proud of you. But then Elaine's expression faltered, just a flicker, but enough that younger me caught it. The ceremony is Saturday night, I said. I'd really like you both to be there. Elaine and Mark exchanged a look. Sweetheart, Elaine began gently, Clara's state pageant is that night. We committed to it months ago. Trevor, standing behind them, smirked like he'd won something. Younger me stiffened. Right? Of course. Wouldn't want to ruin her big moment. The clip froze on my hurt expression. I crossed my arms. See? That's exactly what I mean. They always chose her. The ageless man murmured, unimpressed. Let's look at what you didn't see. The projector whirred, and the scene shifted again. Now Elaine and Mark were sitting in their bedroom, the pageant program on the bed between them. Elaine sighed, rubbing her temples. I hate this. We've missed almost all of Sidney's special events because of Clara's. I don't regret going to Clara's, but I can tell that Sidney already thinks we are playing favorites. I know, Mark said helplessly. But what can we do? I want to go to Sidney's ceremony. So do I, Elaine, Mark said quietly. But we promised Clara before we even found Sidney. And if we cancel now, it'll devastate her. Elaine nodded miserably. We can't just abandon her. Not after raising her for 22 years. The ageless man glanced at me. Reasonable, yes. I didn't answer. The clip continued. Mark pulled out his phone. The university is live streaming the ceremony. We can watch when Clara isn't on stage. The scene jumped, now they were standing outside the theater, huddled over Mark's phone, whispering excitedly as younger me walked across the stage. Look at her, Elaine whispered, eyes shining. She's brilliant. That's our daughter, Mark said proudly. The clip froze again. I stared at the screen, throat tight. The ageless man folded his arms. Tell me, Sidney, did you ever consider the position they were in? I shook my head glumly. Was it fair, he continued, to expect them to immediately cast aside the girl they raised for over 20 years, simply because you returned? I didn't have an answer. For the first time, I wasn't sure I'd ever had one. The projector clicked again, shifting to the Claymore dining room. Younger me sat at the table while Elaine and Mark exchanged nervous glances. A thick folder lay between them. We've been talking, Mark began carefully. About your future. About your place in the family. He handed documents to both Clara and Sidney. Clara, we are giving you 5% shares in the company. This is enough that the dividends will keep you living in comfort for life. Clara, we are offering you a management position in our contracts department. Younger me stiffened. So, Clara gets to be a shareholder and I get, what? A desk in the corner. Elaine winced. No, sweetheart. We want you to be part of the company. Younger me scoffed. Right. So I get to do the work and Clara gets to profit while sitting on her chaise lounge or shops all day. Trevor, leaning in the doorway, smirked. You should be grateful. You don't belong in the company anyway. I'm going to run it. Clara, sitting beside him, folded her hands delicately. It's not about belonging, Sidney. It's about what's best for the company. Younger Ms. jaw clenched. Of course. How silly of me. I forgot my place. The clip paused. I crossed my arms. See? They wanted me under her thumb. The ageless man didn't respond. He simply pressed a button. The scene shifted. Now Elaine and Mark were in Mark's office, the same folder open between them. She thinks we are giving shares to Clara because we chose her, Elaine whispered, voice breaking. We are not, Mark said firmly. You and I both know Trevor doesn't have what it takes to run the company, and neither does Clara. Sidney does, but she barely knows the company. It wouldn't be fair to her or the employees to just put her in an executive position. Elaine nodded miserably. But she's so hurt. I don't know how to reach her. Mark sighed. We are trying to give her a foundation. A place to grow. She's smart. She could run this company one day. But she needs experience first. The clip jumped again, now showing Trevor and Clara in the hallway. Trevor leaned close, voice low and venomous. Don't worry. I'll make sure she never gets a foothold in the company. Clara smirked. Good. She doesn't belong here. This is our family. Our company. And our money, Trevor added. Clara's smile sharpened. Exactly. The film stopped again and I stared at the screen, stunned. The ageless man turned to me. Your biggest mistake in your past life, Sidney, was that you were looking in the wrong place for betrayal. I swallowed hard, throat tight. I suppose you're going to tell me I misjudged Trevor and Clara too. I snapped, shame making me more snarky than I had any right to be. No. In fact, you gave them far too much leeway. I blinked. Excuse me. You misjudged your parents, he continued calmly. But Trevor and Clara. You should have trusted your instincts there. Obviously. They did push me off a building. You are a sarcastic thing, the ageless man commented. Yes, but before that, they were after your parents. My parents? I don't understand. The ageless man didn't even look at me as he adjusted the projector. Before they pushed you off that building, he said, they were already pushing your parents out of their own company. The screen flickered, and a new scene appeared, Mark's office late at night. I stood in the doorway, holding a stack of printed spreadsheets. Dad? Mark looked up, surprised. Sidney. What are you doing here this late? Younger me stepped inside, jaw tight. I found something. She laid the papers on his desk. These accounts, she said, pointing. They don't match the company books. And these vendor payments. They are fake. Someone's siphoning money. Mark's face drained of color. How long? Months, younger me said. Maybe years. The clip froze. I felt my stomach twist. I remember this, I whispered. You should, the ageless man replied. It was the moment everything began to unravel. He pressed a button. The scene shifted, now showing Trevor in a dim hallway, whispering furiously into his phone. I told you to move the money faster, he hissed. She's digging. If Dad finds out. A door creaked. Clara stepped out of the shadows, arms crossed. Then make sure she doesn't find out. Trevor scowled. She already did. Clara's expression hardened. Then we need to deal with her. And our parents. Before they ruin everything. Trevor nodded once. I'll handle it. The clip froze again. My breath caught. They were stealing from the company, the ageless man said simply. And when you uncovered it, you became a liability. I swallowed hard. So they were planning to take over the company. They were planning to take everything, he corrected. The company. The inheritance. The family name. And they were willing to remove anyone who stood in their way. My hands curled into fists. I knew they hated me. They feared you, he said. There's a difference. I stared at the frozen image of Trevor and Clara, their faces twisted with greed and calculation. You weren't wrong about them, the ageless man said quietly. You were wrong about who was standing beside you. My throat tightened. Your parents, he added, were never your enemies. Son of a bitch. That's an apt way of putting it. The question is, do you want the opportunity to return and fix this? Or are you wanting a new life altogether? Your parents, he added, were never your enemies. Son of a bitch. That's an apt way of putting it, the ageless man said, completely unfazed. He closed the file with a soft thunk. The question is, do you want the opportunity to return and fix this? Or are you wanting a new life altogether? My head snapped up. Return. Yes, he said, as if offering a lunch menu. Back to the moment before everything went sideways. Armed with the truth this time. My pulse kicked. Or a new life. Blank slate, he confirmed. New family. New name. New problems. No Claymores. No Crofts. No rooftop. I swallowed hard. But, he added, raising a finger, if you choose a new life, you will never know how this one would have ended. You will never confront Trevor and Clara. You will never reclaim what was yours. And your parents. He paused, letting the weight settle. They will never know the truth. My chest tightened painfully. So, he said, leaning back in his chair, what will it be, Sidney? His tone was calm. Neutral. But his eyes. They held the faintest spark of challenge. Do you want to walk away from this life, he asked. Or do you want to go back and take it back? I didn't even need to think about it. The next time I opened my eyes, I was standing in the grand foyer of the Claymore mansion, again. The déjà vu hit instantly, the marble floors, the chandelier, the echo of footsteps approaching. Elaine rounded the corner first, eyes bright with hope. Mark followed, smiling warmly. Sidney, Elaine breathed, reaching for my hand just like before. And just like before, Clara stepped forward with that shaky, fragile smile. And then she fainted. Except this time, I didn't gasp. I didn't freeze. I didn't assume it was real. I walked over calmly, crouched beside her, and without hesitation, slapped her across the cheek. Not hard enough to injure. Just hard enough to snap the act like a cheap string. Clara's eyes flew open instantly. Trevor, halfway through his dramatic gasp, choked on it. Elaine and Mark stared, stunned. Clara sat up so fast she nearly head-butted me. What? Oh good, I said dryly. You're awake. The parents' shock melted into something else entirely, as they realized someone who truly fainted wouldn't be that easy to wake up. Clara, Elaine said sharply, were you pretending? Clara sputtered. I. Answer your mother, Mark ordered, his voice cold and sharp. I'm sorry, Clara said, tears falling like Hollywood raindrops. What on earth are you trying to do? Elaine asked with exasperation. Mom, don't yell at Clara. She was. Trevor stepped forward, ready to defend her, but Mark held up a hand. Enough? Clara's face crumpled, but this time there was no sympathy waiting for her. And I stood there, calm, steady, watching the scene unfold with the clarity I never had the first time. Clara's eyes turned toward me, a flicker of malice beneath the fake tears. I'm sorry, sister, she whispered. I was just. I'm afraid. Now that you're back, Mom and Dad don't need me anymore. Oh please, I scoffed. Watch your mouth, Trevor ordered. You're a stranger here, Anne. Trevor, Elaine snapped, causing her son to clamp his mouth shut. Clara, first of all, you're a grown woman. Why are you acting like a child? What does Sidney being here have to do with our feelings for you? I'm sorry, Clara stammered, as Trevor helped her to her feet, his arm wrapped protectively around her. Secondly, we never said anything about your leaving, have we? They're right. Sister, I added, concern as fake as Clara's tears in my voice. Do you have such little faith in the people who raised and loved you so long? No, that's not. Okay, let's just forget this little incident, Mark said, taking a deep breath. Then he turned to me. This wasn't the welcome we'd hoped to give you, he said, and for the first time I could see the warmth in his eyes. That's all right. Dad, I said sincerely, guilt for my previous actions rising in my chest. Elaine approached me cautiously, a smile lifting her lips as she reached out to take my hand. This time she did, and I could feel the maternal love I had overlooked so easily in the past. Mom, I said, tears stinging my eyes. Then she pulled me into her arms, and in that moment, I realized that being shoved off a building in my past life was perhaps the best thing that could have happened. The next few days went exactly as I remembered. Passive-aggressive comments from Clara in front of my parents, tearfully bemoaning my stealing her life, and glares from Trevor that were more laughable than threatening. I didn't pay them any attention. Instead, I spent my time getting to know my parents, really know them, and letting myself see everything I'd been too insecure and stubborn to notice the first time around. Then the day I'd been expecting arrived. It had been a week since my return. I had just woken up and was heading downstairs for breakfast when Clara approached. Unsurprisingly, she was already dressed in a ridiculously fluffy dress with full nightclub-style makeup. She glanced at my baggy pajama bottoms and loose t-shirt and sneered. "Is that what you're wearing to breakfast?" "Apparently so," I replied, unbothered. "Excuse me," I added, trying to walk past her. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "I am their only daughter. You're just a gutter rat." "The gutter rat that actually has Claymore bloodline," I pointed out calmly. "If you know what's good for you, you'll leave. Even Trevor wants you gone. So? This house belongs to Mom and Dad. It's their opinion that matters to me. Right? Let's see what their opinion really is." I knew what she planned to do, and didn't even attempt to stop her. The second she lowered herself and slowly rolled down the stairs, I rolled my eyes and fought a laugh. I'd seen better acting in high school plays. Then my eyes lifted, and saw the blatantly obvious camera on the ceiling. Why don't they ever remember the cameras, I thought, amused. Predictably, screams rang out as Clara lay at the bottom of the stairs holding her ankle. I stood there for a moment as the housekeeper appeared, rushing to Clara. Her eyes went to mine, and I wasn't at all surprised by the angry glare she shot me. It was the same as before. Then my mother appeared, followed by Trevor. "Clara, dear. What happened?" Elaine knelt beside her, checking her over. Trevor pushed the housekeeper aside, taking her hand. "I only wanted to talk to Sidney," Clara sobbed. "I'm sure she regrets pushing me." Trevor looked up at me, fury crossing his face. "You dare push my sister?" "Technically, I'm your sister," I pointed out calmly, my eyes on my mother. It was this incident in the past life that had convinced me my parents would always favor Clara. Elaine had looked at me with an unreadable expression before having the housekeeper get the car to take Clara to the hospital. She had only said they would talk about it when they returned. I believed they would blame me, and I had coldly said I hadn't meant to and I was sorry. I never mentioned the slap Trevor gave me. Now, Elaine looked at me again, but this time I noticed it. Her eyes went to the camera above the stairs, then back to me. "Sidney, I need to take her to the hospital. We'll talk when we get back." I nodded. Elaine helped Clara to her feet, her arm gently wrapped around her. Clara turned back to me, her face lit with smug triumph as she leaned heavily on Elaine, milking the limp for all it was worth. I just waved goodbye. As they headed to the door, Trevor raced up the stairs. "I'll teach you a lesson today," he snarled, hand raised. However, this time, as soon as he reached me, I let loose with a backhand, and another Claymore sibling descended the stairs with incredible speed. In my past life, this was the moment everything inside me shut down. I had been so terrified of being blamed that I apologized before anyone even asked. I'd convinced myself my parents believed Clara. I'd convinced myself I didn't matter. I'd convinced myself I was alone. What I never knew, what I never saw, was what happened after they left. This time, I did. Elaine and Mark called me into the sitting room that evening. Clara sat on the couch with an ice pack on her ankle, Trevor standing behind her like a guard dog with a bad haircut. Elaine's expression was calm. Too calm. "Clara," she said, "tell Sidney what you told us." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "For lying." Again. Trevor jumped in immediately. "She only lied because she was scared. And I was only trying to defend my sister when this stranger attacked me too." Trevor. Mark's voice cut through the room like a blade. Trevor, shut up. Elaine folded her hands. This is the last time. Do you both understand? Clara swallowed. Yes, Mom. Trevor clenched his jaw. Yes. Elaine continued, her tone firm but not unkind. There is no need for insecurity. Sidney is our daughter. You are our children too. But further attempts to drive her away will only make us reconsider the current living arrangements. Clara's eyes widened. Trevor stiffened. And for the first time, I saw it, they were afraid, and I won't lie. I enjoyed seeing it. After that, Trevor and Clara remained quiet for a while, not because they had suddenly learned restraint, but because I never gave them the opportunity to try anything. Every attempt Clara had once used to humiliate or frame me was effortlessly avoided, leaving her with no foothold and no audience. Every tantrum Clara threw when my parents spent time with me went ignored unless I decided to smile at my parents and let Clara have her moment. When I announced my award at the university, I waited until Clara started to cry, clearly prepared to sacrifice herself and say that they should attend my event, since I'm the real daughter. Then I interrupted, telling my parents sincerely that I knew Clara had a performance that day and that I understood they had already promised to attend. I assured them that there would be a live stream, so I knew they would be there in spirit, which sucked the air out her sails before the first tear could fall. When the day arrived for my parents to give Clara her shares and offer me a position at the company, I allowed Clara's smug expression to linger for a moment before accepting the offer with genuine enthusiasm, watching the satisfaction drain from her face as Trevor's predictable tantrum erupted about her being placed on the same level as him, only for their parents to shut him down with a single glare, as they reminded him that I was hired based on my education and grades, and that he had yet to prove he was ready for any promotion at all. Every prank, every ripped dress, every public insult dressed in phony concern was neatly avoided. Then came the day my parents announced they wanted to hold a banquet to introduce me to society, and I immediately recognized the spark of scheming in Clara and Trevor's eyes, remembering all too well how they had once teamed up to humiliate me in front of half the city and the press. This time, I declined with a calm explanation that I disliked crowds and that, frankly, the only people interested in the private lives of wealthy families were those looking for reasons to shame them, and that I would much rather have a private family gathering with the relatives I had not yet met. The frustration on their faces was enormously satisfying, but I knew they were far from finished. I also knew it was time for my parents to learn the truth. In my last life, I never told them what I had discovered because I had already convinced myself they wouldn't believe me. Unfortunately, I made the fatal mistake of letting Clara and Trevor know I had uncovered their crimes, essentially assisting in my own murder. This time, I had a plan. I had already collected every piece of evidence from Trevor's pathetic hiding spot in my father's office, a location so careless and so transparent it revealed exactly how he intended to let our parents take the fall for his crimes while he positioned himself to seize control of the company the moment they were disgraced, and the sheer arrogance of it made me curse my own stupidity and blindness. As I sorted through the documents, bank transfers, falsified invoices, and the conveniently missing funds that traced back to accounts only Trevor should have had access to, I also found the unmistakable signs of Clara's involvement. Her signature appearing on authorizations she had no legitimate reason to sign, her name attached to shell accounts she pretended not to understand, and her digital fingerprints scattered across transactions she had once sworn she knew nothing about. By the time I organized the evidence into a clean, irrefutable sequence, I felt a calm certainty settle over me, because this time I would not confront them in fear or desperation, but with a plan that ensured they could not twist the narrative, manipulate the truth, or silence me before I was heard. I decided it was finally time for my parents to know the truth. One night, while Clara and Trevor were out doing God only knew what, I asked my parents if we could speak privately in my father's study, a request that immediately drew a flicker of concern from both of them, but none of the suspicion or emotional distance I had once imagined. and when we were seated, I placed the folder on the desk and explained, calmly and without dramatics, that I had found something they needed to see, something I should have shown them long ago. As they opened the folder and began to read, I watched the shift in their expressions as confusion gave way to disbelief, disbelief hardened into anger, and anger settled into a cold, focused clarity that told me they understood exactly what they were looking at. My father read through the transfers and falsified invoices with a growing tension in his jaw, while my mother lingered on the signatures and authorizations that bore Clara's name, and neither of them spoke for a long moment, the silence stretching between us until my father finally closed the folder with a deliberate, measured calm that was far more unsettling than any outburst could have been, and when he asked how long I had known, his voice steady and revealing nothing, I hesitated. For a heartbeat, debating whether to reveal the truth of my past life, but ultimately deciding against it because even the most trusting person would never believe something so impossible. I overheard Trevor and Clara talking one night. When I got up to get some water, I said instead, offering the simplest explanation that still held a sliver of truth, and my parents sat silently for a moment, clearly struggling with the documents in front of them and with the realization of what their son and the daughter they had raised as their own for over 20 years were capable of, until my mother finally met my eyes with tears gathering in hers and asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, if all of it was real. I sighed, because the old me would have snapped that of course they thought I made it up and stormed out in wounded pride, but now, thanks to the ageless man and the clarity he had given me, I understood the pain in their expressions and the difficulty of accepting what lay in black and white before them, so I answered gently that yes, it was real, and that if they wanted me to destroy it and pretend I had never seen it, I would, because they were their children too, and I knew this was not easy for them. My father took my mother's hand and squeezed it gently before telling me, with a voice heavy but gaze steady, that there would be no pretending and no destroying anything, because he was not sure where they had gone wrong in raising children who would try to destroy their own family. And although I wanted to protest, I couldn't, because it had been clear for years that both Trevor and Clara had been spoiled to the point of entitlement, and he continued by saying that he could accept his mistakes, but that it was time his children learned to accept theirs, that actions had consequences, and that they had made a very big mistake in thinking their parents were so easily stepped on. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle into something solid and resolute. We need a plan, I said. Mark spent the next morning quietly arranging a series of internal audits and access point monitors at the company, the kind that looked routine on the surface, but were designed to flag every unauthorized login, every suspicious transfer, and every attempt to alter financial records. And because Trevor had grown so comfortable with his own carelessness, Mark knew it was only a matter of time before his son walked straight into the net without realizing it had been placed there for him. Elaine, with a calmness that surprised me, contacted a discreet private investigator and instructed him to follow Clara, not with the intention of catching her in something scandalous, but simply to confirm what the documents already suggested. And within hours the investigator had begun tracking her movements, her meetings, and the people she thought she could trust, all while she remained blissfully unaware that every step she took was being recorded. At home, my parents arranged for additional cameras to be installed discreetly throughout the mansion, especially in his office, in a quiet acknowledgement that the people they had raised were no longer people they could trust. They were installed in a way that the only ones aware of their presence were the three of them. The first real crack in their defenses came when the detective's report arrived, a thick envelope delivered straight into my mother's hands, and the moment she opened it I saw her face crumble as she stared at the photographs of Clara meeting with two men and a woman who, at a glance, looked perfectly ordinary, but whom the detective identified as guns for hire. He hadn't been able to hear their conversation, but he had captured the moment Clara slid a thick envelope across the table to the woman, an exchange so deliberate and practiced that even my mother, who had spent years making excuses for her, burst into tears at the sight of it, while my father stood behind her with a stillness that was far more dangerous than anger as he took in the images one by one. It was the first time they truly understood that this wasn't petty jealousy or sibling rivalry, but something darker, and the weight of that realization settled over the room like a cold shadow neither of them could ignore. The alert pinged softly on my phone, pulling me out of sleep instantly, and when I saw the notification, movement detected in my father's office, I slipped out of bed and hurried to my parents' room, easing the door open just enough to whisper their names as I held up the screen. The three of us sat together on the edge of my parents' bed, watching the live feed on my phone as Trevor and Clara moved confidently through my father's office, not sneaking or whispering, just calmly assembling what they believed was the final step of their plan. Trevor didn't even bother to read the documents in the folder. He simply scooped them up with the casual arrogance of someone who thought he had already won, completely unaware that Mark's people had replaced every page earlier that afternoon, filling the folder with a neat collection of evidence that pointed directly back to him. Clara leaned over his shoulder, smiling in that soft, poisonous way she reserved for victories, telling him that once they sent the packet to the feds as anonymous whistleblowers, the investigation would fall squarely on Mark and Elaine, and the company would be left vulnerable and ready for them to take over. Trevor nodded, pleased with himself, sealing the envelope without a second glance, saying the agents would never question a report that came from concerned insiders, and Clara added that once the authorities were busy tearing their parents apart, her hired contacts would take care of Sidney quietly and permanently, clearing the last obstacle between them and everything they believed they deserved. My mother's breath caught. My father went still. And I felt a cold, steady calm settle over me, a surreal clarity of watching two people outline their own downfall with absolute confidence, completely unaware that every word was being recorded and every document they touched was a trap designed specifically for them. Trevor placed the sealed envelope neatly on Mark's desk, patting it like a trophy, and Clara whispered that by morning, everything would be set in motion. And in the quiet glow of my phone screen, we watched them walk out of the office believing they had won. For a long moment after Trevor and Clara left the office, the three of us just sat there in the dim glow of my phone, the silence heavy with everything we had just heard, and when my mother finally whispered whether we should confront them right now, my father shook his head with a calmness that felt colder than anger, saying that confronting them would only give them a chance to twist the story, to claim misunderstanding, to cry and manipulate and rewrite the narrative the way they always had. No, he said, voice steady. Let them send the packet. Every piece of evidence in that folder ties directly back to them. The moment they hand it over, they are handing over their own confession. My mother swallowed hard, still shaken. But what about Sidney? They talked about having someone handle her. I felt her eyes on me, worried, searching, and I forced myself to stay steady, because I knew exactly what night was coming, the night I died in my last life. But I couldn't tell them that, not without sounding unhinged, so I simply said that we could use their confidence against them, that if we let them believe everything was going according to plan, they would act exactly the way they had before, only this time, we would be ready. I didn't remember any hired killers in my past life, but things had already changed in ways I couldn't predict, and the truth was that Clara and Trevor didn't need professionals to be dangerous. They only needed opportunity. And we were going to take that away from them piece by piece. My father nodded slowly, the decision settling over him like armor. Then we let them move first, he said. And when they do, we'll be waiting. And in that moment, the fear I had carried from my past life finally loosened its grip, because this time I wasn't alone, and this time the trap wasn't for me. It happened faster than any of us expected. The next morning, the three hired goons Clara had met with finally made their move, cornering me in the parking garage at work as I headed to my car, clearly expecting an easy target. But what they didn't know was that the detective had already identified them, the police had been alerted hours earlier, and officers were waiting nearby for exactly this moment. So when one of them grabbed my arm, the entire garage lit up with flashing lights as half a dozen cops swarmed in and took them down before they could so much as breathe in my direction. They were arrested on the spot, and within an hour, two of them were already talking, eager to cut deals, and by the time the statements were typed up, both Clara and Trevor's names were written in black and white, tied directly to the payment, the instructions, and the intent. Meanwhile, back at the house, Trevor and Clara were still riding the high of their perfect plan, completely unaware that their hired muscle had been arrested and were naming names. and that the packet they'd prepared for the feds was filled with evidence pointing directly back to them. When the detective called Mark to confirm the arrests, we were all in the living room, and the moment my father hung up, he looked at us with a calm, heavy certainty and said, "It's over." But the universe wasn't finished with them yet. Not even close. Because just as Trevor and Clara were preparing to celebrate, they got the call. The goons had been arrested, the police were asking questions, and their names had come up immediately. And that's when panic finally hit them. The message came just after midnight, a short, frantic text from Clara telling me to meet her on the roof, because she had information I needed to see, something urgent, something that couldn't wait. And even though she didn't say it outright, I knew exactly what this was, the same night, the same place, the same cold echo of my past life pressing against my ribs like a warning I had already lived through once. I showed the message to my parents, and Mark didn't hesitate, he called police and the feds. My father said that if they wanted a rooftop meeting, then we would give them one, only this time the shadows wouldn't belong to them. I walked up the stairwell alone, the air thick with the strange calm that comes when you've already survived something once, and when I pushed open the rooftop door, the night air hit me with the same cold bite I remembered from before. But this time I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity, because I could hear the distant hum of engines below, the quiet shuffle of officers taking their positions, the soft crackle of radios waiting for the signal. Trevor and Clara were already there, standing near the edge with the city lights painting their silhouettes in sharp, brittle lines. Clara smiled when she saw me, a thin, desperate smile that didn't reach her eyes, while Trevor stepped forward with the confidence of someone who still believed he was in control, telling me that everything was falling apart because of me, that I had ruined everything. Because the truth was already unraveling behind them. Clara stepped closer, her voice low and trembling, telling me that if I had never come back none of this would have been necessary, and Trevor echoed her with a coldness that made the air feel thinner, saying that I had left them no other option. And then he reached for me. The same way he had in my past life. The same angle, the same step, the same sickening déjà vu. But before his hand could touch me, the rooftop exploded with light, red, blue, white, sirens cutting through the night as officers surged through the door behind me, shouting commands, weapons drawn, voices sharp and echoing off the concrete. And Trevor froze mid-step while Clara stumbled backward, eyes wide as the reality of the moment finally crashed over her. Trevor Claymore, Clara Claymore, step away from her and put your hands where we can see them. The feds moved in next, badges flashing, voices steady and unshakable, as they listed the charges: conspiracy, attempted murder, solicitation of violence, falsifying federal reports, obstruction. Each word landing like a hammer, each accusation backed by the very evidence Trevor and Clara had so proudly assembled themselves. Clara broke first, collapsing to her knees as she tried to explain, tried to blame Trevor, tried to claim she didn't know, but the agents didn't even look at her, because the statements from the arrested goons were already in their hands. And the packet Trevor had sealed so confidently was sitting in an evidence bag downstairs with his fingerprints all over it. Trevor didn't speak at all. He just stared at me with a hollow, stunned expression, as if he couldn't understand how the world had shifted beneath him so completely. And I stood there, steady and unshaken, watching the moment that had once ended my life turn into the moment I reclaimed it. When it was finally over, my parents stood in the quiet of the hallway looking both devastated and relieved, and this time I didn't walk away, or shut down, or pretend I didn't care. I stayed beside them, reminding them gently that they weren't terrible parents, that they hadn't failed, and for the first time since my return, I felt the weight of my past life loosen its grip on my chest. A week later, we went to see Trevor and Clara in jail. My parents need closure. I needed to gloat. Clara broke the moment she saw us, sobbing and begging for forgiveness, insisting she had only acted out of fear, that she thought she would be abandoned, that she never meant for things to go so far. But my mother's expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "Stop your acting," she said coldly. "You have never been afraid of losing us. You were only afraid of losing your ATM. No, Mom, that's wrong. Sidney has lied to you. She framed me because she was jealous of me, of the love you have for me. Stop it, Elaine snapped, not even a hint of softening on her face. Whatever you're crying for now, it's not love. It's fear of facing consequences for the first time in your life. Daddy, please. No, Clara. You made your choices. We could have all lived a happy life together, but that wasn't enough for you and you dared to harm our biological child out of your own greed. We will not lift a finger to help you. Forgiveness was no longer something you had the right to ask for. It's your fault, Clara hissed, pointing at me. You did this to me. You'll regret this. My lips lifted in a smile. I doubt that very much. As we left the visitation room, a scream of frustrated fear and anger followed us out, the sound lifting my spirits. We saw Trevor next. Mom, Dad, I swear, this wasn't my idea. Clara, she manipulated me. I was shocked by Sidney's return and wasn't in my right mind. She convinced me that Clara would take everything. Did you ever think to come to us with your concerns? Elaine asked, this time her voice broke as she looked at her oldest son. Did you give us a chance? I should have. I'm sorry, he cried. I'm sorry, Sidney, he cried looking at me, but my expression didn't change. He was only sorry he got caught. It's far too late. Mark replied coldly. You can't leave me here. I'm your son, Trevor pushed, wiping at the tears on his face. My father looked at him with a calm, final certainty and said, I have no son. Whatever happens now, you are no longer a Claymore. Dad. We left without another word. In the hall outside of the visitor's room, my mother finally broke. My father and I both wrapped her in our arms, understanding the pain she was feeling. Finally, she sniffed and pulled away, wiping away the last tears she would shed over Clara and Trevor. The day the verdict came in was bright and sunny, the kind of day that felt almost too cheerful for what it represented, but my mood matched it anyway. My heart ached for my parents, but watching Trevor and Clara sob and plead for mercy with the same desperation they once used to manipulate everyone around them filled me with a quiet satisfaction that would be hard to surpass. Petty, maybe, but I am human, and some victories are meant to be felt. When we returned home, the house felt too large, too quiet, too full of memories that no longer belonged to the future, and my parents sat together in the living room looking lost in a way that broke my heart more than anything else had. Eventually, my mother asked if I would stay. I smiled gently and shook my head. I told them, as an adult I needed to build a life of my own, and I can't be one of those people who spend their entire adult life depending on their parents, but that didn't mean I didn't want to spend time with them. Something in their expressions softened at that, as if they finally understood that letting go didn't mean losing me. It's time to put yourselves first, I told them. You need to take this time to be together, to see the world and live the life you've put on hold for far too long. For the first time since Trevor and Clara's schemes came to light, they smiled, small, tentative, but real, the smiles growing as they started talking about all the things they'd always wanted to do. My heart finally felt at peace as I watched them. Joy at finally having let myself see who my parents were, filling me as I watched their growing enthusiasm. Finally, we all reached an agreement. They would sell the house and purchase a large apartment in the city center. Something bright and modern and easy to maintain. However, they insisted it would be in my name. It would be my home, but as long as I agreed, it would be their home base, a place they could return and refresh between their trips to see the world. I considered refusing, still determined to prove I wasn't after their money, but I didn't. I'm not after their money, but I'm not a fool. Who would turn down a penthouse apartment? Once I agreed, my father announced he would be semi-retired, and that I would be groomed to step in. He assured me that the VP and the other executives could guide me until he returned, and I felt no fear at the thought, only a quiet pride that I had earned this second chance, this new beginning, this life that was finally mine to shape. And so it ended,
Not with tragedy or loss, but with healing, with freedom, with a family rebuilt from the ashes of what once destroyed us.